Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and our non-binary babies, because there are some of those out there. Welcome to another episode of Live from the CRJ, the official podcast of the Dillard University Center for Racial Justice. I am Lawrence Weber, your project assistant, and here we always keep an empty seat for her is Tia Suggs, project coordinator. And we got a guest for you today. Now, if you are an alumni of Dillard University, you definitely know this man because he was probably in your American National Government class anywhere from the last 20 years, because goodness knows I was. You miss, you flunk. and you, of course, know if you don't miss on rainy days and sunny days. I know I'm ticking a box for a lot of our alumni right now. You also know if you don't show up, you're saying, Dr. Clark, you don't give. Well, I try and keep it clean on the podcast. I'll try my best to keep it clean on the podcast. I am talking with political science professor and host of actually his own show on WBOK, Dr. Gary Clark, and my former professor as well. How you doing, Dr. Clark?
Oh, yes, sir. Mr. Weber, it's beautiful to be here. Talk to you and your brother.
Yeah.
That's how far we go back. Actually, I've been here at Dillard University since now we're going into my 36 years consecutively. So, yes.
Oh, wow.
That's the nature of the beast.
So he started here when I was, like 4? So, if many of you know, I know a lot of things have been going on, and I tried to get a couple of other people, but I am so glad that I was able to get you, because as a political scientist, we're in a very weird place right now. So, just as a quick update, as if you have been living under somebody's rock, in the last 2 weeks, we had an assassination attempt against the current presidential candidate and former President Donald Trump. And within like a week or 2 weeks within that, the current incumbent, President Joe Biden, decided that he was not going to go forward with his reelection campaign and was going to cede that over to his vice president, Kamala Harris. Now, there's a lot that has been going on. President Trump decided that he was going to name his, and there, of course, a lot of firsts. President Trump decided that he was going to name his running mate, J.D. Vance, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the first millennial presidential candidate. And now we are looking at a Kamala Harris candidacy for president, which, should she win, she would be the first woman president and the second African-American president and first Asian American president. So a lot has been going on. And as of course we know here at Live from the CRJ, we of course are nonpartisan. However, this is more of a we're coming at this as more of a historical situation. So can you kind of feel for us what in the world is going on?
Oh, well, Lawrence, yes, sir, Mr. Weber, this is absolutely a beautiful time. I can recall when I was in college as an undergraduate, my professor at the time, he said this is the greatest time. He thought this is the greatest time to study politics and to study political science. He said to us that when he was in college, he thought that was the best time to study because they had just come out of the Korean War, and that was in the 50s, and things were taking place in the early 60s. And so he thought that was the best time. And the professor told him that was the best time to study. And so I was in college, undergraduate, in the 70s. And so my professor at the time, he said, you know what? This is a great time to study politics and to study political science because everything is new, everything is involved, and every election is most important. Well, guess what? Let's move forward. Now is the best time to study political science and politics. It is always a great time to study politics and study the political process, because it's evolutionary, should we say? It is fluid, and so you ask what is going on. This is a time now in the American divide that we've got to pay particular attention. The demographics of America is changing, and changing rapidly, and it changed before our very eyes. When I was born, Black Americans were the largest minority in the United States. Now, when you were born, Latino Americans were the largest minorities in the United States, and Black Americans have moved to number 2 on the equation, on the linear equation. And well, guess what? When your kids and other kids are born, Black Americans will move to number 3, because Asian Americans are going to move into that slot. And so, what we've got to understand is, but these changing demographics become changing politics and changing attitudes and belief systems, and also a changing culture. So now, with the advent of all of these firsts, the assassinations and the attempt, well, I lived through the 60s, and that was part of my formative and developmental years in grammar school and that sort of thing. And I recall that it was a very volatile time. We had assassinations, black, white, and we had individuals where you had a lot of, you had, in that same mix, you have individuals who were threatening to overthrow society and wanted to. But you know what? During that period, it wasn't individuals who we find now that come from the ultra right wing of society. Guess who it was then? It was those that came from the ultra left, the liberals. The ultra liberals was, don't forget to understand this, they have bombs too, just like the right wingers have bombs. And so, and they were using bombs, and they were dropping bombs, and they were doing the sort of things that we find unacceptable. I will say this before we move forward, is that he's changed his name now, but H. Rod Brown said it best. Violence is as American as cherry pie. The American experience is rooted in violence, and we must understand that. Once we understand that, we can have somewhat of an idea in terms of how this equation is moving in terms of the political experience.
And I'll say this, one of the things I do get kind of frustrated about is, unfortunately, when so many of these violent political acts happen, there is this notion that, and it's said multiple times over different sorts of politicians, that this is not who we are, when unfortunately, historically standing, kind of is.
well, you're absolutely correct. That was a football coach that said, we are what our records say we are. And what our records say we are, that's what we are. If we 0-12, we are 0-12. That's the sort of team that we are. Well, guess what? We didn't understand what this is what the record says that America is. Now, you can't run away from who you are, but you have to be able to confront and know how to recognize it, and to prepare for the nature of the psyche of what America presents itself to be. Martin Luther King once said that America has a schizophrenic personality, and we have to understand the nature. And so that requires individuals to understand the nature of schizophrenia. And so we understand how America is. Once you begin to understand the culture and the nature of America, and you study it as you do and others, then you can have a greater sense of where we're headed. That's why it's important for intellectuals, universities, for folks to sit there and actually engage in academic study and actually engage in understanding this society. And then you can have some sort of predictive behavior. We understand what is going on with the Donald Trump movement, and the Trumpism movement. And it is a movement, but the nature of movements, all movements come to an end. and all movements eventually decay and deteriorate. And so America, and what gets to me oftentimes, I hear people say this all the time, is that why is it that the Nixon and those individuals had the Southern strategy? Yes, they had the Southern strategy. Then they're saying now that we're looking at 2025, what's taking place and what the Heritage Foundation is doing. Well, guess what? We were taught when I was in school, in particular in grammar school, when you are sleeping, the other side is working. They're awake. You got to always stay awake. My father used to always tell me, Gary, you have to prepare yourself for a war, because it is indeed a war out there. And so in the preparation for a war is to understand you've got to have your agenda. Don't think that there's no agenda out there. I'm from the Brown versus the Board of Education generation. Now, there are those who believe that Brown versus the Board of Education is settled law. It is not settled law when you live in a democratic society, when everything you get is a vote. Everything is a byproduct of the Supreme Court decision or the legislature or executive action. There's no such thing as settled law when you have evolutionary society. So we should not be surprised with the sort of animus that's directed toward people of color right now, because this is indeed the last hurrah. This is the last hurrah. And yes, sir.
I think what you have essentially seen, and speaking of settled law, we obviously saw that with Roe v. Wade. We thought for 50 years that was the law of the land, and unfortunately, it was repealed. So things like Roe v. Wade or I got this. Obergefell v. Hodges, which made marriage equality a law. So a lot of things get to change like that. Do you think? Let me say this. Do you see a lot of similarities between the issues that we were having now and the issues that you may have gone through within the 70s or the 80s? Because a lot of people were reminded that the last assassination attempt was in 1981, if I'm not mistaken, against Ronald Reagan. Do you see a lot of similarities between that and what we're dealing with right now?
Oh, yes, these similarities exist. We understand this. We live in a free and open society. We have 370 million Americans, people in this society, from all walks of life, every culture. When you have an open society like that, you have to always be on guard. America's a beautiful place, but also America's a very dangerous place. So you have to be aware. And let me say this. In terms of the transition that's taking place in our society, and in terms of the war that's taking place, and many people, I've had people to say, well, Dr. Clark, I never thought of it like that. But the experience comes from this. The civil rights movement taught individuals, not only in the global community, international community, but the civil rights movement taught conservatives how to fight the war. They're only using the civil rights blueprint. When Americans could not get redress, when blacks could not get redress from the executive branch, when they could not get redress from the legislative branch, they learned the way the way you change society is to perhaps get some redress through the judicial branch. And so what the conservatives have said, ultra conservatives should I say, said we've got to get control of and influence over the judicial branch. And so once you get your judges in on all levels of the federal court, and then finally the Supreme Court, then you can then have the final arbiter. Also, they've discovered as well is that you've got that the bureaucracy, Richard, the bureaucracy itself is where power also exists, the civil service bureaucracy. And so what you do is there's something called bureaucratic sabotage. It happens everywhere. It happens in universities. It happens in government, but particularly in government, that when you don't want something to take place, the bureaucracy can slow it down. The bureaucracy can slow everything down. And so if a secretary is missing that day and the secretary has the password to all the files, guess what? That's bureaucratic, and she can slow it down. He can slow it down.
And it seems like it goes much farther than just a filibuster at that point.
Oh, by far. So the goal is to change the civil service as well, and if you can make it political appointees, whatever you may want to do, but to change the civil service. Richard Nixon, back when he was in power, had a reorganization of the executive branch of government, and he wanted to change the bureaucracy as well, and he was effective at doing it. But you changed the bureaucracy. because the bureaucracy in the federal bureaucracy theoretically is supposed to be non-partisan, but you find a lot of highly educated people of color in the federal bureaucracy who have genuine political opinions and views in terms of how they think America should be run. So the bureaucracy, the judges, and so the civil rights movement is a blueprint to how you change society.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk a little bit about Vice President Harris. I don't have a precedent for that one. I really don't. I don't have a precedent for someone saying, okay, I'm dropping out. I'm going to give it to my vice president. I don't think we've seen that within the last 100 years. So this is clearly uncharted waters here. Do you think that, and whatever the press will say is what the press will say, and I can't really talk because technically with this podcast I'm a member of the press. I'm a member of the media. But many people are saying that she has a lot of work to do and a lot of hurdles to jump over, ethnicity and gender notwithstanding, but simply having a campaign that starts at a very, very late point. Do you foresee the issues that she's going to have and how that's going to affect essentially all of us?
Well, there is a precedent for this. Although there are different circumstances, Lyndon Johnson had to step aside, and Hubert Humphrey ran for the presidency. Mm-hmm. And he was not successful, but he was effectively pushed out by the press, the war, and there was the war in Vietnam and those sort of things. And so Hubert Humphrey went in and narrowly lost the election. Well, guess what? We have under these are different circumstances where we have a president who, because of the environment, chose not to run again, mm-hmm. and now here is his vice president moving in, just as Humphrey did, and to move in and to run for the national office of president. Well, you know something. They say that the campaign staff is not there. They say that all these things are not there. Well, politicians on all levels, and in particular that highest level, they're always in a state of campaigning. They're always in a state of preparation. Don't believe the hype that they're not prepared, they're not ready. This president was bullied out of the White House. There are some folks who say it was a quiet coup. And now everyone is giving him all his kudos, and rightfully so. He did not fight it. He accepted it, and he accepted it under a condition that I would understand are great. But he's at this stage of his life where he's accomplished everything he may have wanted to accomplish politically. He's done all of the good things economically they would want to do. And on top of all that, they're taking shots at the president. And so the environment now, and then we also see that those who are engaged to protect you are not doing their job. Mm-hmm. And so what does that say to you? And he may want to stay in, but what will his loved ones say? Wait a minute. We got to think about doing this. Can they really effectively protect you? No, will the guns at some point be turned toward you? Well, I think that Kamala Harris, to get back to the original question, the vice president, is that she's in a very unique position to be successful and to win. I'm happy for her presidency in the sense that she comes from my alma mater. I did my PhD at Howard University and also in political science. So we walked those same halls, Frederick Douglass halls, mm-hmm. right there. So I already know her mindset. I already know her base. She shares the same sorority that my late mother shares, Alpha Kappa Alpha, the AKAs. I think that's wonderful and beautiful. And so, but there are certain things that she has already in terms of her preparation that has her set and has her completely prepared for the position. And to say that America has to get adjusted to her, every election, you've got to prove yourself. you don't just walk into the presidency. You're not just given the presidency. The closest person that I could say that actually walked into the presidency was George H.W. Bush, the first Bush, and he was genuinely prepared for the presidency. But guess what? He didn't just he had to earn it himself. He had to fight hard because he had the East Coast pedigree. The individuals wanted to be a president, served in all of the great positions. So she is right there. She is academically prepared. She's professionally prepared, and to say that her problems exist because she's a female, a woman can win. Hillary lost not because she was a female or because and I say Hillary Clinton. Her failure was that she underestimated Donald Trump. Donald Trump campaigned. Donald Trump worked, and Donald Trump recognized one thing that we in the South, those of us who grew up in the South, know: demagoguery works. So you got to know how to fight a demagogue. And so, when it's all said and done against this particular candidate, against that, she has to be prepared. Kamala Harris, the vice president, has to be prepared for demagoguery. Because when all else failed, you pull out the race card, and so she's got to be prepared to fight the demagogue.
And the funny thing is, from what I have seen, this, I guess, has reinvigorated a lot of people because beforehand we just saw two. At the risk of being ageist, two old guys running for president that the general public really didn't want. Now it has been reinvigorated because there is not two 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, and again, trying my best not to be ageist here. Two 70-year-olds running for the president. We now have somebody in their late 70s who has a very strong, very loyal base. And now we have Kamala Harris, who I'm not necessarily sure who her base is. I'm not necessarily sure, while I do know what she does stand for. She doesn't, I guess she doesn't have I hate to use this term, rabid base as a rabidly loyal base as Donald Trump has. Can we speak about the advent of social media and this base? Because, I mean, in 2008, social media, for the most part, was kind of in its infancy. You had Facebook, you kind of had MySpace, Twitter was like around. So at that time, candidate Obama used that to his benefit. Now it's 2024. You have to have a social media base in order to do campaigning. So do you think social media, especially in this notion, will help or hurt her? Because even within the last 3 days, I've seen a number of issues and misinformation toward Kamala Harris. The one I saw just this morning was a young man who was blaming Kamala Harris for the issues with Oscar Grant. And my brain was like, wait a second. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of San Francisco. Oscar Grant was murdered in Alameda County. That's not the same person. That's not the same jurisdiction. Where do you see her trying to essentially fight this sort of back and forth with not just social media, but social media misinformation? Because we've seen social media and misinformation explode recently. It was bad before the pandemic. It's incredibly bad now, especially with the advent of AI, things like deep fakes. Do you see that being a serious problem with Kamala Harris?
Well, she was Attorney General for California, and she covered the entire state. And yes, social media is highly important. You got to have a social. You have to have a social media person, people, and a place. I just came back from a political consultants conference a few months ago, and the one thing that's imperative is that, and one of the most highly attended portion of the conference is that relates to social media and your platform. What happens for us is that to win a campaign, an effective campaign, you've got to fight on the air, the land, everywhere. So you have to have social media, and and it's imperative, and you have to be prepared for misinformation. You have to be prepared for opposition research. You have to even put together your own opposition research team, and you have to be prepared to when a lie gets out there, or something which is untrue that gets out there, or maybe something that is true is published, but yet you have to respond to it. You have to have the funding to respond to it, or else it stays there forever and it becomes the truth. And so that's part of having a campaign, having troops that can fight for you and argue your particular position. I think that in this case, the vice president, or as the presumptive nominee, the beauty of this is that it's just 100 and a few days to go. It's a very short duration. As opposed to running a marathon, she's going to be running a sprint. And so when you look at her base, and they won't have time to get out there and get tired. They'll be able to get in there and push. That's the beauty of it. And so if she can organize effectively, which is what I'm pretty sure that they're doing, and then have the funding to pay to correct political consultants, they have the funding to pay for individuals to actually engage in street campaigning, because in order to get her base, in the cities and also in the swing districts, you've got to be able to go there and get troops on the ground in not only in the wards but in the precincts, to get individuals to come out and vote. And sometimes you have to just go get them. In many cases, you do. And because they don't have the resources, yes.
And like I said, the one thing that I do like, especially about Black communities, is, I'm not sure if the term is souls to the polls, but yeah, a lot of people would get together and go to the polls. I was here during the 2004 campaign between George W. Bush and John Kerry, and the one thing that because the local branch, I believe the Norman Mayer branch of the library, was the polling place at the time, and it was much smaller than it is now. But I remember seeing lines of students waiting to vote. Now it's a little bit different. Our kids are Gen Z kids now, and they get a lot of their information from social media. Do you think she has to basically speak directly to Gen Z in order to, because even during that period of time in 2008, Barack Obama spoke directly to millennials.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
You got to speak directly.
So Gen Z, I think this will be, with the exception, 2020 was actually the first time a lot of Gen Z kids were able to vote. And there are kids who are right now just making it to 18 who are getting ready to vote. What do you think? What could you tell Gen Z to do when it comes to getting their information and making their personal decision to vote?
I would say 100% is that they've got to listen to everyone, read everything, and validate. One thing that you know how to do real well is to go to the source, and many of us have the sources right there in our pockets, and to validate and talk to your friends and engage in proper and good discussion. It's not wrong to talk. It's not wrong to talk about politics. There are folks who say, I don't want to talk about that politics. No, engage in political conversation. You don't have to hate individuals because they share a different opinion than you, but you've got to discuss it because that is how you receive opinions. That's how you receive beliefs, and develop your beliefs. And also talk to those folks who are influencers. Also talk to those people who are opinion multipliers. And then also, and you yourself as an individual will be an influencer, believe it or not. And the fact that you know certain things someone else may not know, then that helps. Now, there are those who are
influencer takes on a completely different meaning here in 2024.
Well, right. It depends. True, but it depends on what degree. But it grows. It's like everything else, a snowball. And then when you really become an influencer, you really are an influencer. But what happens is that there has been a forms of voter suppression for those of your listeners who can hear us. There are many of those who are listening to this broadcast can recall when actually the voting precincts were located on the campus itself, and not at the library. Well, you know what? It was discovered that, oh no, we can't have that many individuals, that voting block of individuals right there on the college campus. Oh, here you are with 600 votes, 700 votes right there on the college campus. That could swing an election. And you know what? It has swung an election. It helped one state representative get elected. This precinct that we went down and we looked at it and we saw what happened. Matthew Willard won the state representative seat because of this precinct right here, and that sits at Norman Mayer. We looked at the counts to see where his votes came from in his first election, and the young folks turned out. And know what helped? He came to a forum that we held. And he stayed around at the political science department. He stayed at the forum and talked to the kids. At that point, the students said, "We're going to help you." And Matthew Willard's a very young man, one of the younger state legislators, and he comes from a very political family. And guess what? They made the difference in what was indeed a very, very tight election. And this precinct in Norman Mayer, where the Dillard University is located, made a particular difference. And young people make differences. And so, I would suggest to you and to suggest to everyone that you've got to go everywhere.
Absolutely. And you don't count the young folks out. Don't shut them out either. And I just want to tell anybody, if you live in the state of Louisiana, you do need a photo ID in order to vote. So make sure you bring that. You have to check for, if you're listening to us outside of the state of Louisiana, you do have to check for different areas, because that is your right to do that. That is a privilege that a lot of people went and got injured and died for. So your choice to vote is very, very important. If you could tell any upcoming students who may be interested in politics, who may want to run at some point, which, Lord bless you, what advice would you give to our students and to our community as a whole who may have that mindset or fear, okay, maybe I don't want to mess in politics because politics makes people ugly, makes things crazy, and I don't want all of that strife in my life. What would you tell them? What would you essentially tell them?
Well, let me say this very quickly before I exit, and that is that the current Congressman Troy Carter was my former student. I taught at Xavier for 4 years. I chaired the Department of Political Science there. He was a political science major for 4 years, and he's now a member of the U.S. Congress. The congressman that had the seat before that, Cedric Richmond, was a member of the faculty here at Dillard University and adjunct political science. And I gave him his first job out of law school as an adjunct professor here at Dillard University teaching political science. And there are a host of individuals who are in public office, judges and legislators and others that I've taught over the years throughout the country. What I say to them, and I say to them, and I will say to others as well, and I said it then, I say it now. Your education costs too much to sit on the sidelines. Forget about anyone that's come before you. let's look at you directly. You're going to spend $20, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 getting an education, $80,000, then sit on the sidelines. Even if you just spend $2,000, $4,000 and sit on the sidelines. No, if you only have one class and you only pay tuition for one class, it costs you too much to sit there and watch someone do things which do not help the black community or people of color. It costs too much. So don't sit on the sidelines. And I say this in particular for my purpose. It doesn't matter what position that you take, whether you're ultra liberal, ultra right wing, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green Party. You can always tell a student of Gary Clark, Dr. Clark, my students, because they know how to make the critical analysis. And all that's important is that you know how to make the critical analysis, because in the final analysis, you're going to go back. The society will shape you to make sure that you make the correct decision at some point, regardless of what you may think or believe.
Absolutely. Dr. Clark, thank you so much for trying to kind of navigate us into the crazy that we are currently dealing with in this country.
Can I say this before I exit? I'm so proud of you and so proud of what you're doing, and I'm proud of the skills set that you have and that you've developed over the years, and that you've always had the same persona and same personality then as a student and now. And I know you forgot that I taught your brother, and he was always one of the cool young men that I taught. He always wore a hat. A hat and a trench coat. Sir.
I actually need the hat now. It's getting a little chilly up there. Dr. Clark, thank you so much. Can you give us a little bit of information on where we can listen to your show, which you have to go into soon?
Fact, what you can do is just go to the WBOK website and click on live, and it will be on live. WBOK 12:30 a.m. .com.
There you go.
Just go to WBOK 12:30 a.m. Click on their website live, and you'll hear us. And today I'm having Coach Mark Cook. Many of your listeners may remember Mark Cook. He was the women's basketball coach at Dillard for a number of years. He was also the assistant men's coach for a number of years, and he had several championship teams. That's when they were really beating Xavier down, all these other schools, and they were dominating the GCAC. And so we're going to talk about women's basketball. He's a recruiter now, and among things. So we're going to talk about women's basketball, the WNBA, and what it takes, and also how do you recruit women and into the sport, and where you find players. And he goes to Europe every year, twice a year, and he goes to the Caribbean to recruit players for Division I and NAIA schools.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you can actually find us on Instagram and Facebook. You can find us on Instagram at Instagram.com. I already remembered it. I got it. Instagram.com/CRJ_DU. You can also find us on Facebook. That is Facebook.com/CRJXDU. You can also talk directly to us. We have a email. If you've got questions, if you have questions, you can field those questions at crj@dillard.edu. That email again is crj@dillard.edu. Dr. Clark, thank you again for joining us on this show. I know he got to run because he's got another show that's coming up. But we truly appreciate you being here. We appreciate you listening as well. But until next time, I am Lawrence Weber, the project assistant, and we always have an empty seat for Miss Tia Suggs, the project coordinator. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you later.